Hello, my name is Scott Davis. Welcome to New World Birth. This is the weekly neutrino forecast for August 7th to August 13th of 2016. And on August 7th, we have the sun. You can see it denoted here by this black circle with a dot in it. It's in Leo. It's also in the 7th hexagram, and on the outside of the wheel, we have the chop mark for the 7th hexagram, numbered from bottom to top. The 7 goes yin, yang, yin, 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 yin. And then the 7th hexagram is mapped to an opening in an energy channel called a gate. And right here, this is the 7th gate of the role of the self, the army, the point of convergence by design, the need for leadership to guide and order society that engenders transference and thus influence, located in the G center in a collective logic energy path in the understanding circuit called the channel of the alpha, a design of leadership for good or bad that connects to its harmonic, the 31st gate of leading, influence, the law of friction, whether active or passive. And I found human design to be amazingly accurate in describing the person that I use it as my primary tool when I provide readings. And we have the following activated gates on August 7th. We have the sun in the 7th gate with the earth in the 13th gate. The north node is in the 64th gate with the south node in the 63rd gate. Mercury is in the 40th gate. Venus is in the 59th gate. Mars is in the 34th gate. Jupiter is in the 6th gate. We have Saturn retrograde in the 9th gate. Uranus retrograde in the 42nd gate. Neptune retrograde in the 37th gate. And Pluto is retrograde in the 54th gate. So obviously not every gate activation forms a channel, but this information can be very helpful if you know your own human design chart, because some of these transits will form channels with potentials in your personal body graph. And as we begin the week, we have two channel definitions due to the transit field. With Neptune in the 37 and Mercury in the 40, we have the channel of community until the 7th. This definition brings the energy where people will wonder where they belong in the scheme of things and try to live that out. It'll be a time of thinking about marriage and family as the foundation of community. Fairness becomes more important under the influence of the channel of community. Balance becomes important in all aspects of life. People will explore how they fit into their community and on a more mystical level, where they fit in the universe and what their true purpose is. This impacts people to think they need to be supportive of those beings around them and get pulled into things related to the community. The defined ego center can influence those without to feel like they have something to prove or want to make improvements or make promises and commitments that may not be correct for them. And the defined solar plexus can influence those folks without emotional definition by feeling that unfamiliar wave of emotions, perhaps even leading to acting confrontational. And then with Jupiter in the 6th gate and Venus in the 59th gate, we've got the channel of mating, a design focused on reproduction until the 10th. This definition brings the energy where people find it easier to be intimate with almost anyone, which can happen quickly, but also may be misunderstood. This channel is of pure fertile power, as in making babies, but also birthing creative projects and processes. I'd expect this to be a time period where people may consciously or unconsciously break down the barriers to intimacy and new endeavors. Using your strategy and authority is the only way to determine whether an intimate encounter is correct for you or not. And with the defined sacral center, this can influence non-generator types with having the endurance to work and feeling busy and thinking that they know when enough is enough, which could lead to the premature or abrupt end to something that really needs more time. And again, the solar plexus bringing the emotional wave and perhaps leading to people being more confrontational. August 7th begins with the sun in the 2nd line of the 7th hexagram. The sun in the 7-2 is described as the Democrat, the ability to lead by serving the will of the majority. Exalted, the application of universally accepted systems when connected to the through the alpha channel to gate 31. Influence, the potential for widespread and revolutionary effect on society. The capacity of the self to lead when chosen. Detriment, elitism, and the degeneration by the Democrats of democracy. The capacity of the self, once chosen, to feel superior to those who chose them. Later on the 7th, the sun then moves into the 3rd line of the 7th hexagram, and this shift happens at 1 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 500 hours UT. The sun in the 7-3 is the anarchist, the rejection of any institutionalized order. Exalted, the constant need for change, no matter what the prevailing conditions. The drive of the self to express many roles. Detrimented, the nihilist, the capacity of the self to deny the value of any role. Also on the 7th, Mercury moves out of the 40. And so we lose this definition, and it moves into the 64, where it joins the North Node. And Mercury in mythology is the messenger of the gods. This is about communication, and Ra put it as the expansion of human consciousness through communication, not just as words, but also as music. And Mercury is in the 64th gate of confusion before completion. Transition, like birth, requires a determined strength for the passage through. And Mercury in the 1st line of the 64 is in the line of conditions, exalted in penetrating to the center, the understanding that instills the necessary harmony to survive disorder. Amongst the confusion, the difficulty in finding the point. Detriment of the powerful temptation when having a transition in sight to hasty action, the urge to act when you think you have made sense of confusion. And in the program, Mercury is about expression through communication. It influences the homogenized population to communicate about the themes of the gate and line that transiting Mercury inhabits. The primary impact is psychological. It impacts the not-self mind. It distorts the way that we look at things, which can lead to action. This conditions people to think and communicate about the same things. And in the 64th gate, I expect people will talk about inspiring past experiences. On the 8th, the sun then moves into the 4th line of the 7th hexagram at 12:29 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 4:29 UT. The sun in the 4th line of the 7th hexagram is exalted and described as the abdicator, the willingness to accept the judgment of the people and or the rules of law. Exalted, the grace and wisdom to step down for the benefits of the whole, the capacity of the self to accept the judgment of others. Later on the 8th, the sun then moves into the 5th line of the 7th hexagram at 11:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which is 3:56 UT on the 9th. The sun in the 7-5 is described as the general leadership whose authority must be absolute and is sanctioned by society in times of crisis. Exalted, the gift of attracting loyalty necessary in harmonizing the potential of society. The capacity of the self through its role to attract loyalty. Detrimented, the commander isolated from his troops and obsessed with victory at any price. The lack of loyalty when the self insists on isolation. On the 9th, the sun then moves into the 6th line of the 7th hexagram at 11:24 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which is 3:24 UT on the 10th. The sun in the 7-6 is the administrator, the ability to share and justify appropriation power. Exalted, the power to communicate the frameworks of responsibility, the capacity of the self through its role to communicate responsibly. Detrimented, the bureaucrat whose lust for power eventually destabilizes organization, the role of the self to seek power through the communication of responsibility. And then on the 10th, the sun moves out of the 7th gate in the hexagram, and it moves into the 4, defining the head center and the ajna center. And the earth moves from the 13 to the 49 over here in the solar plexus. So we have the earth is in the 49th gate of principles, revolution, ideally transformation of forms based on the highest principles, not simply for power. This shift happens at 10:51 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which is 2:51 UT on the 11th, and the sun is in the 4th gate of formulization, youthful folly, the energy to beguile and succeed despite ignorance, freedom from retribution. And the sun in the first line of the 4th hexagram is described as pleasure. Ultimate pleasure cannot be achieved without perfect timing. Exalted, the instinct to know the right moment and circumstances where pleasure is rewarded and not punished. The potential to recognize that there is a natural timing to the understanding process. Detrimented timing is not a product of discipline, exaggerated self-discipline that leads to the abuse of pleasure, the potential to recognize, but the urge to force the timing. And as we move from the 7 to the 4, we enter the gate of sharing collective answers. The 4 is a collective logic gate in the ajna center that looks at patterns that can be projected into the future to create formulas and explanations that need to be tested. It forms the channel of logic with gate 63's pressure to understand, which can bring doubt. The 4 looks for explanations about why life is difficult and how it can be made better. Its polarity, the 49th gate of revolution, is the tribal gate. This is about rejecting the oppressive power structures to redistribute resources of the tribe. This brings us to the 3rd variation of the cross of explanation in the quarter of duality. With the sun in youthful folly, the collective process translates images into language. It comes up with answers. It doesn't mean the answers are correct. To know that, they need to be tested. And the 4 leads to the 17, which means the answers become an opinion. And then with the 62nd gate of details, do we have the details to support the opinion or not? If it is supported in detail, then it can become an experiment, which can be verified or not. Formulization takes inspiration and turns it into thought. And then also on the 10th, Venus moves from the 59th gate and hexagram into the 40, bringing us a definition that defines the ego center. And so we have Venus in human design is about values, morality, natural law in which we deal with the other and the consequences of the world around us. And Venus is in the 40th gate of aloneness, deliverance, the point of transition between struggle and liberation. And Venus is in the first line of the 40th hexagram, which is recuperation, exalted, the ability to relax relax and enjoy the fruits of one's behavior. The ego strength to enjoy being alone, detrimented the ego uncomfortable with being alone too long. And in the program, Venus is about control through maintaining the status quo in the way in which we operate with each other. We experience the transiting planets through the Maya, and we're not here to avoid the Maya, but we can embrace it as yourself by following your strategy and authority. And with the Sun in the 4 and the South Node in the 63, we've got the channel of logic until August 16th, which is about mental ease mixed with doubt. And none of us is really designed to make decisions based on our minds. This channel brings mental gifts that should be used in the service of others rather than trying to understand our own lives. When your strategy and authority presents you with someone who needs your clarity and inspiration, this transit can support the process. This is about scientific thinking through being skeptical and questioning whether the logic or patterns are valid. It brings mental pressure to people without a defined head center, which in turn can bring doubt when they try to analyze their own lives. The definition is future-oriented and looking at mental patterns and projecting them into what lies ahead. This can bring worry as the answers revealed by the process need to be tested and prove to determine if they have practical applications. The best use of this definition is for research purposes and testing of hypotheses, then recognizing that the results need to be invited before they can be shared. The defined head center can influence those without to feel the pressure to think about things that don't matter. And then the defined ajna center can influence folks to believe that they're certain of something even when perhaps they are not. And then with Neptune in the 37 and Venus in the 40, we've got the channel of community until the 14, which again, this definition brings energy where people will wonder where they fit in the scheme of things, try to live that out, thinking about marriage and family as the foundation of community, fairness being an important aspect of interactions within the community, and, you know, on a more mystical level, thinking about how do they fit into the universe as being, of course, the big community and what their true purpose is. Again, the ego center being defined can influence folks to feel like they have to prove themselves or want to make improvements or commitments that may or may not be correct for them. And the defined solar plexus, again, brings that emotional wave that could influence folks to act confrontationally. On the 11th, the Sun then moves into the second line of the 4th hexagram at 10:18 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This is 2:18 UT on the 12th. The Sun in the 4-2 is described as acceptance, the recognition of limitation in oneself and others that leads to tolerance and the suspension of judgment. Exalted, the glorification of feelings, the mother which always pardons the errant child. The potential to recognize that not everyone can understand. Detrimented, the assertion of the ego at the expense of others' failures, the potential to take advantage of the lack of understanding in others. On the 12th, the Sun then moves into the third line of the 4th hexagram at 9:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 1:45 UT on the 13th. The Sun in the 4-3 is irresponsibility, the general refusal to apply oneself diligently when one can get by with much less effort. Exalted, where art is more valued than the artist, the potential to enjoy the formulas with no regard for their practical application, a detriment of the rationalization of irresponsibility as an act of refocalization, the potential to justify such a process in order to maintain it. And then also on the 12th, Mercury moves from the 64, leaving behind the north node, and it moves into the 47. And then we talked about Mercury earlier being about communication. So what might be communicated with Mercury in the 47? I'd expect to hear people talk about having oppressive experiences. This is the gate of realizing oppression, a restrictive and adverse state as a result of internal weakness or external strength or both. And Mercury in the 47-1 is in the line of taking stock, the ability in times of hardship to concentrating on eradicating the negative factors that have led to oppression, realizing that negative thoughts have to be eradicated, detriment of the delusion in seeing oppression as an exclusively external phenomena with disastrous results. The sense that the world is against you. And with the North Node in the 64 and Mercury in the 47, we have the channel of abstraction, the design of mental activity mixed with clarity until August 17th. The energy of this channel is about creating something new out of something old. This is about abstract thoughts being brought into the collective consciousness through the arts, philosophy, history, and culture. It's wonderful energy for telling stories about our experiences that inspire others, but brings confusion when used to try to resolve our own issues. And the Defined Ajna Center can influence folks to believe they're mentally certain, even when they're not. The Defined Head Center, again, brings pressure to think about things that don't matter. On the 13th, the Sun then moves into the fourth line of the fourth hexagram at 9:11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's 1:11 UT on the 14th. The Sun is exalted in the 4-4. It's described as the lyre. Role-playing as an art form, the actor, exalted fantasy protects and nurtures the sense of purpose and reason, no matter how misguided. The potential to find or illustrate the formulas through fantasy. So I want to thank you for checking out New World Birth. The next segment of the weekly neutrino forecast will be on August 14th, 2016, should be available on the 13th, when we'll continue to look at the influence of the heavenly bodies as they transit the sky and the hexagrams of the I Ching. You can check us out on Facebook, Blogger, or YouTube, and I encourage you to share this information as videos or as text as widely as you choose, and I invite you to contact me at newworldbirth@yahoo.com if you have any questions or wish to schedule a reading. And if you've been thinking about getting a reading, please contact me. I would love to provide you a reading during these uncertain times. You'll need to be able to either call me in Maine in the USA, or we can connect with Skype to receive your reading. We're also accepting donations to keep these reports freely available. And as I've said the last few times, we are really in need of some financial support to keep this going. So if you've been thinking about getting a donation, again, email me at newworldbirth@yahoo.com, and I'll send you instructions on how to make a donation or get a reading. It's something that you'll value. It will give you a lot of excellent information, and it will also help support us in providing these videos and information regarding the transits in human design. So, as always, I am blessed that you've taken the time to connect with my passion for these ancient mysteries, their synthesis and application to our journey during this incarnation. The light in me honors the light in you. Namaste, in Lakesh, and as Ra would say, love yourself. All my best to everybody, and look forward to connecting in the future.